Thank you everybody for joining us. I really am so excited. We've been so heartened by the response that we had to today's event, today's discussion, and we really want to thank everybody for being here and supporting this important topic and this discussion. I'm thrilled to have an amazing group of panelists with me, women who I think really have a wonderful perspective on what it's like to be working within corporate America today, and also what that experience is as it relates to women supporting one another. I really appreciate them being here, and we're going to introduce them in a moment. I also just quickly want to thank Matt and the Supplier Community team. When we came to Matt and the team with this idea for a discussion topic, he immediately saw that there was value to having this discussion and offered the resources of his team to help make it happen. So I want to thank him and the Supplier Community team for making this happen, helping us make this happen today. I want to quickly start off by just giving you a little bit of context for our discussion. I do need to share my screen, so I'm going to do that. So, so what we the context for today's discussion is, it starts off back in July. So in July of this year, the hashtag Women Supporting Women started trending on social media. Celebrities from Kerry Washington to Reese Witherspoon and Ava Longoria all started sharing black and white pictures of themselves, along with millions of other women, with messages of support for women and acknowledging how women have played an important role in their lives. Khloe Kardashian wrote on her post, "Let's spread the love and remember to be kinder to one another." And that was speaking to women and her female followers. Since July, the hashtag has been used more than 9.5 million times, and it's really become a symbol of women supporting one another. And so we were very intrigued by this, and we started thinking here at SheSpeaks, we started thinking that it would be really interesting to dig deeper. And if something like this could trend so quickly, women supporting women and women coming out and saying how other women really needed to do their part in lifting each other up, we wanted to better understand how women perceived this issue of whether women were supportive of one another. So we did a quick survey with our SheSpeaks community of women and influencers from around the country, and we just asked them the question, in general, in all areas of your life, do you think women are supportive of other women? And I want to just first quickly talk about this pie chart on the left. And what you can see there is that, unfortunately, only 37% of women, and this is the aggregate number, I have the breakout by age, which we'll talk about in a second, but the aggregate number showed that only 37% of women felt that women were supportive of other women most of the time. And unfortunately, you have this 53%, this large orange section here, as well as this almost never category, this gray 5%. And between those two, it's almost 60% of women think that other women are not that supportive of women sometimes, but not often, to almost never. So not a great way for the numbers to come out. And then when we looked at it by age, that's where we really thought, this is important for us to start to dig deeper into, because if you see the age breakout here from 18 to 24 all the way up to 55 plus, you can see that actually the younger the woman is, the more likely she is to think that other women are not supportive of one another. And you would have hoped that the numbers would have been the other way around, that the trend was getting better, so that younger women did actually feel that women were more supportive of each other. But it's actually, the data did not show that. It shows the opposite. So we thought, wow, this is not going in the right direction. We really need to start having an honest conversation about how important it is to be supportive of one another, and what does that really mean. So today I am really excited to have with me a wonderful group of women who have agreed very much immediately as soon as we reached out to them. All of them agreed to participate in this important discussion and to share their experiences being in the corporate world, and also what it means, their thoughts on what it means to be supportive of one another. So what I want to do is I want to have them each kind of quickly introduce themselves and also talk a little bit about, their careers, what they have done up until now, and then we'll get into some specific questions. I do want to say that we welcome questions from you. So if you have questions, there's a chat function. So please put the questions in there. We have allocated time to get there, to get to those questions. So as we're going, if you think of a question, please feel free to put it in. And then we will get to that Q&A section. And I'm going to start by saying first, why don't we have Jessica Duquesne, who's with Hershey, if you can kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your career thus far.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Jessica Duquesne, and I'm originally from Lima, Peru. Currently, I am an omni-channel marketing manager for the Hershey company, and I support the Walmart business. It means that anything that you see at Walmart that has to do with Hershey, that's my fault. Or anything online and media, I love my job. I also lead the Hershey's local community support efforts. And a month ago, actually, I was asked to co-lead the Latino Business Resource Group for the sales organization. So that was a great honor, really. Ready to get on board with that. We're working on just really making an impact throughout the sales organization. And then I do have over 10 years of experience in this industry. Prior to this role, I was at SheSpeaks, where I worked on account management and previous to that project management. That's where I worked with Amanda. So I had the good fortune to work with her. She's amazing. Then before that, I actually was in the nonprofit business, also doing business development, community outreach, and all marketing support.
Great. Well, great to have you here, Jess. Thank you for joining. And I'll move over to Carrie Dreyer, who is at Philips. Carrie, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your career thus far?
Sure. Thanks for having me, and hello, everybody. So I'm currently the lead of e-commerce activation at Philips. So what that means is I handle all of the retailer.com activation, with the exception of Amazon, and any brick and mortar shopper activation that takes place as well. So I work with a nice variety of teams. So I have a leg in the marketing team, and then I have another leg in the sales team. So I kind of sit right in between them, which gives me a nice preview of what's going on holistically. I also have had a career at Unilever, where I was started my shopper marketing career. I was there for quite a long time. Also Catalina Marketing, and for a short period of time, I did do a stint with a entrepreneurial brand, but the majority of my time has been spent in corporate. So I have quite a lengthy history, and Unilever's also where Eliza and I first met and started working together with SheSpeaks.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Carrie.
Sure.
Excited to have you. And Amanda Danish, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So I'm Amanda Danish. I'm the VP of Shopper Strategy at Saatchi and Saatchi X. So I work with great brands from Procter & Gamble, TrackPhone, a little bit of Kroger business here and there. Work with a bunch of great brands. My career history is a little bit more varied. My background's in psychology, so I started out doing neuropsych testing. I was a counselor at drug court, and I started as a temp at a little ad agency called Thompson Murray in 2003. They never got rid of me. So I have been there now for 17 years. I have worked in both Northwest Arkansas and Chicago offices. And recently I went back and got my master's in industrial organizational psychology, so I could bring the psychology and business worlds together a little bit more. And so now we joke that my side gig at Saatchi is leading the L&D team.
That's great. Well, thank you for being here and for talking with us. So I wanted to start and ask you all to react because we did just share this stat about what we uncovered in doing some of our research with women. I'd love to just get your reactions to this. What do you guys are you guys, first of all, are you surprised by this data that, that there is such a large percentage of women who don't think that women are supportive of one another? And on top of that, the fact that the younger you are, the less likely you are to think that women are supportive of each other. Anyone want to start with that?
I'm happy to. I wish I were surprised by it. Um, the simple fact is that when you are in a group that is underrepresented in an area, so say in leadership, you operate from a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset, right? So, how much is there out there of what I want? And if you only see maybe one female leader, then you are more likely to go after that with a scarcity mindset of there's only one spot and it's going to be mine, right? Whereas if you think broader, if you think more in an abundance mindset, you see that there's more to be had. And so you're more likely to bring other people with you, right? It's basic principle we see across the board in human behavior. And it's disheartening to see that people are still operating in this type of a scarcity mindset. We have a great opportunity to bring other women with us to make sure that we are moving forward and not just moving our own careers forward. So I hope that this will change, in the future as we are bringing up more and more women, and hopefully this 18 to 24 demographic, as they enter the workforce, start to see more coaches, more mentors, more people who are experiencing success that they perceive themselves to be more like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate that you brought up that point, Amanda, about hopefully as they join the workforce. I should say there's a lot more data in this study, but one of the things that we did was we broke it out. When we talked to people, we asked them how they felt this was happening in the corporate world, or in the workplace, I should say, not just corporate world, but the workplace, in terms of women supporting one another, in the political arena, and then socially, just more personally on the social side of things. The social side of things actually turned out the best in terms of, women feeling that other women were supportive of them, although still more to the negative than there was to the positive side of it. But the workplace was in the middle of those three. Political was the worst, in terms of women feeling that women were supportive of one another politically. But in the middle, you had the workplace, and the numbers were not strong there in terms of women feeling supported by other women and their colleagues and peers. So curious to hear, Carrie and Jess, what are your perspectives on this data?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jess. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. I agree with Amanda. I think that there is a sense of limited amount of jobs that are out there for women and the potential of growth. And so what we tend to be is, especially like I think that nowadays and even the younger generation have been, and that actually doesn't surprise me at all. The younger ones say that the number is higher because the younger generation actually has been more empowered to go after it, right? It is like go and be yourself and try to climb the corporate ladder or be an entrepreneur, everything you can be, but they still see that there's not enough for them. So even though they're inspired, then they also feel that there's other women that they're comparing themselves to. Okay, so there's only 2 VPs in this company that are female, for example, and so so one of those is my spot. How do I compare with the other candidates? And normally they tend to compare themselves with other women, instead of competing or comparing themselves with males. which honestly, that what we should do. I mean, we should inspire each other to go like, there, it might be only 2 VPs in this company that are female, but there could be 4, there could be 5, so just go after it. But I mean, definitely it is something that I hear. I also hear women saying things like, well, if I, went through all this, she can figure it out as well. So instead of us elevating each other and coming to other women with our maybe asking for advice and even being vulnerable to them, we tend to hold back because we think, okay, I don't want this to look as weakness either. And like, we actually don't reach out as well and say, okay, what is it, how can we help you? Because we're comparing each other, and we're like, if she did it, maybe I can do it without anybody telling me how to do it. So it's a matter of perception. I think that is something that we all need to help each other and overcome. But yeah, not surprised by that.
Jess, you brought up one of my pet peeves, which anyone who knows me knows this about me. It's the idea of passing down the bad. It's the idea of, well, I had to put up with it, so they can too. It's a rite of passage. It's everyone has to go through this. No, they don't. Right. And if you can do something to help people not have to go through that type of sexism, the type of bias that you had to go through, why wouldn't you want to stop that?
Yeah. And I think we're starting to see a shift from a corporate level too, where now corporations are almost their feet are being held to the fire, where they need to start making changes in this area, or they could have considerable backlash both internally and externally for not addressing it. But again, that's a large ship that you're trying to turn in this environment. It's going to take a long time. But I think, like Jessica said earlier, she's part of a group of empowering people internally and taking that forward. I'm part of a Winergy team in Phillips, where it's a women's interactive network group. So I think taking kind of the ball where it is right now and saying like, okay, we're going to take the opportunity. We need to keep pushing this forward. We're going to help our companies continue to make the shift and make the turn. But it is sad to see that this younger generation still thinks the majority, they're not supported in the workplace. But I do think we have a great opportunity right now. Like, this is the pivotal time. So the change is coming from all areas. And I think this is it's a good time to be in business. It's a good time to actually have a voice and speak loudly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we started delving into this a little bit deeper, because we were very concerned about what we saw in the data. What we started to unearth is that the younger women are much more engaged than older women in social media. And there's a lot that they feel in social media where they're attacked. And there is, unfortunately, I think some of this is also what women feel in social media. We because of the nature of the type of women we work with, also a lot of them are influencers. And if you ask any influencer who's very active in social, they will tell you that they've come up against this themselves. You put yourself out there, you put your life out there. And unfortunately, sometimes women can be the biggest critics of other women. And we see this a lot with moms. So if you're a mom and you choose to be working versus you choose to be stay at home, there's so much judgment that's going on. So, when we started delving a little bit deeper into it, we started uncovering things like that there was judgment going on, that if you were younger and you were more active in social media, you also were more likely to feel like you'd had women say things to you, or other women say things to you that were not as positive. So I want to move on to another question for you. What do you think it looks like when women are supportive of each other, or what does it look like when they're not? Maybe sometimes it's easier to spot what it looks like when somebody's when you've experienced or if you've witnessed women not being supportive of one another. Maybe we start there. What have you seen instances in your careers where you observed women not being supportive of one another? And then maybe we can talk about what does it look like when you are? So anyone want to answer that?
Oh, I'll jump in. I think the one of the biggest things that I see where it is so obvious that women are not being supportive is when they say the things that they can say because they're a woman, right? If you blame someone's bad day on PMS, if you mention that someone got that promotion because they slept their way to the top, right? I can say that, I'm a woman. You can't say that. Absolutely not. It is even worse if you are saying that as a woman, because what you're indicating to others is that it's a real thing and it's legitimate. They just can't say it, right? So what you're doing is legitimizing bias. You're legitimizing these discriminatory behaviors. And whether it's in a joking manner, whether it is something you feel is innocent, what you are doing is detrimental to women in your workplace. And so sometimes you have to check your own biases. And it's really hard to do that kind of, self-reflection and to see that maybe some of the things that pop into your head that you've been socialized to think really aren't helpful. They're not supportive. They're not advancing any sort of a cause. They're not advancing equity within the workforce. And so you have to stop and think and not write it off as, oh, I can say that because I'm a woman.
Yeah,
It's interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say a very recent example was unfortunate. It didn't take place in the workplace, but I think it's relevant because this mindset starts at a younger generation, right? We have to change the mindset of the boys and the girls who are growing up, and that there needs to be a common level of respect across the board. My son was at a soccer game and the ref blew the whistle, and somebody did something to another player and the ref said, "Come on guys, this is not girls soccer." And one of the moms on the sideline actually stood up. I wasn't there, but my son told me about it. And she was like, "What did you just say?" And so what I thought was interesting was that the day after the game, my son's coach pulled them all together and said, "These are 15-year-old boys." He was like, "I want to address what that ref said yesterday." And he spoke to them in such a way that, like, that is not okay. I think you all are aware the girls team is doing much better than we are. And second of all, like, that's not how we view people. We're all athletes. And so I was really proud, and I sent the coach an email because I was like, "Thank you for addressing that," because it's unfortunate, but the boys hear that, and then that's kind of, it's not corrected. That's kind of how they go through their working lives. So not a work example, but I think an example where it starts very early on. So it is something that needs to be addressed, but shifting the mindset at an older age, right, when you're already in the workforce, is a lot harder, I think. And to Amanda's point, like, when you acknowledge, like, yeah, it's just a bad time of the month, like, no, that's not okay. And that's not a reason to give somebody else an excuse for you.
Yeah, and an example that I can think about, it really has to do with, like your life stage, and like Amanda said, words can be very powerful, especially coming from other women. In my experience, like, I've always been very driven, very dedicated, in comments like, "When do you actually see your children? You work so much." Like, coming from other women, it could be hurtful, and you feel non-supported at that time. And I would say not just happening to me, but I have heard it across the board of women actually judging other women for the choices that they make depending on their life stage. And it's not necessarily just with children. It also is people that are single, talking about the ones that have children, and opposite. So I think that instead of questioning each other, we should probably support and elevate ourselves, right? Saying, you are doing a great job. Let's focus on the positive. Let's focus on growth and support and encouragement, and using those words of encouragement instead of questioning and bringing each other.
Jess, that's interesting. I had a very similar situation where someone said, well, of course you can do X project. You don't have kids. And, the first thing that popped into my mind was, would you have said that to a man, right? Would that have even popped into your head whether or not they had children when you were thinking about their assignment to a project, right? Most likely not. And, that ended up leading to a whole situation, where I had to talk to some of the other women that were my peers and talk about the fact that, am I being assigned to these things because I don't have children? Am I being asked to do these things because you think that I can travel for weeks at a time, or what are the actual things that are going into this? Or is it because I'm actually qualified to do it? Or is it because you don't want to? Right. So it opened up a whole lot of different conversations, a lot of different considerations that I don't necessarily think would have ever arisen had it been the choice between myself and male colleagues or all male colleagues.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And I remember, early in my career, hearing a lot about that. And also one other area that I'm hoping that you guys can weigh in a little bit about is, I think too, what we've found is that there are differences in the way that women communicate versus the way that men communicate. And I'm curious if, we there's so much going on for women as it is in the work environment. On top of that, I think there's also the sometimes the minutes earlier, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, Bob, that's a great point." When I'm thinking, wait, Sheila said that 5 minutes ago. Like, what's going on here? I'm curious if you guys have seen that type of difference also, just in terms of the way that women communicate, and seen that come into play in terms of, how women are perceived in the workplace.
Yeah, it goes back to the idea that words are powerful, right? And the fact that we have terms now like mansplaining and heaping, like we can use those words now to call people out on things like that. But at the same time, you also have to think about the fact that every single day, what we do in business is that we understand and we try to learn how other people communicate best. We try and learn how our clients like to be communicated with. We try and learn all of these different things. It's very similar in that process. And so when you listen and you hear someone else explain something in a way that you're like, I just said that, chances are the other people didn't necessarily hear it that way. So you can go at it with a bit of grace, right? Be like, thank you for expanding on on what I said earlier. I appreciate that, right? You don't have to go into it with the attack of, gee, thanks for stealing my idea. Let's move on, right? You do have to understand that there are differences in communication styles. There are differences in how people internalize information. But at the same time, you do not have to let that slide, right? There is a happy medium, especially when there might be some question as to what the intent was behind it, right? You can assume positive intent there, and just go at it with the idea that I'm not going to let this derail me, but I'm not going to let it go unnoticed.
You gonna say something, Jess?
Yes. I love that example because it is true. You know, like sometimes you say something and perhaps you didn't say it in the way people would understand it. I mean, it comes to the whole point of like know your audience, right? Like, so sometimes you do have to go at it, not like a suggestion, but go at it as like, this is the idea. This is what I think should be done, and be very clear about it, because maybe your audience is a male audience and that's the way they want to be approached. And if you come like, well, I was thinking that perhaps this is because sometimes, you know, we don't raise our voice and we're a little timid sometimes in order to share ideas in that type of with that type of audience. Then to make sure that we actually make it a point that that is what we want to do. Now, if a man then afterwards comes and says the same thing, there's been situations where I say, I'm glad you agree with me. Yes, that is great. So, you know, like, not, I don't have to say you stole my idea, because that's right. I mean, that is, not, you have to have grace, but also make sure that don't leave it unnoticed and say, that is right. I'm glad you agree with me. Let's elaborate. Maybe we can work together since we have the same vision, you know, and partner. And again, because if you say, well, that was my idea, then again, you don't want somebody going, oh, she's getting emotional now. You know, so no, you didn't say that, no, but actually say it, be agreeable. Yes, understand what is going on. Don't leave it unnoticed, but make sure you raise your voice and you actually share that that is what you want to work on, that you want to execute your idea as well. So just make sure you're every time.
Yeah, I remember a time I was in a meeting and someone had asked for my opinion, and I said, I feel that this strategy is not on point with where we're trying to go. So after the meeting, another woman colleague who was higher than I was at the time pulled me aside and she said, you know, don't use words like I feel. It just makes you sound too feminine. I was like, but I am. I am feminine. And, you know, she said, no, I'm just trying to say, like, don't, you know, don't try and make it too emotional. So that made me think back for a second as to what I was trying to explain to the group. And it did make me adjust my choice of words the next time I wanted to convey my thought or my, you know, point of view on something, but I still used the word I feel. This is not appropriate or on point or aligned. And it just, I thought, where are you coming from with that comment? And, but then when, you know, guys are in the room and they say, well, I feel like this is not part of our strategy. Okay. Does that make them too feminine? So it's a tough balance, but I do think that being in situations like that, it's good because it makes you take a step back and think about where you're coming from. Are you articulating what you really want to? And maybe you get a little better at how you're trying to get your point across, but you know, I don't think that there's ever a point where someone should tell you you're too feminine or, you know, you're too soft, or, you know, I think you be you. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, I think that's it's a fair point too, and you know we're sort of tiptoeing through so many things. I guess as women in the workplace, there are preconceived notions, and you guys have all talked about that in different contexts. That there are these preconceived notions too about how a woman is, and then if you feed into that, to your point, Carrie, then you're kind of called out for it. That, you know, whoever it is, whether it's your leader or whoever it, you know, might give you feedback afterwards, you kind of are feeding into their preconceptions of what a woman, how a woman behaves. And I think, to the point Amanda and Jess are making too, it's about, you know, we all have to adapt in terms of how we communicate and which audience we're talking to, but it's also about being able to stand your ground when it is something that you are feeling strongly about. Can you guys think of an example? Now, we talked about examples where women maybe weren't supportive of each other. Have you seen examples, or have you experienced yourself in your own careers where women were particularly, you saw women being very supportive of another woman, or you had that experience yourself?
Yeah, I think most recently I'm actually seeing more of it at Philips, and it's very simple. It's women giving kudos to other women on presentations or during webinars or during big meetings, launch meetings, where they're saying, you know, thanks to so and so for pulling the data together. She did a great job. Thanks to, so it's small acknowledgments like that that I think go along the way. But it's interesting because I'm hearing them a lot more often now than even in the previous, say, 12 to 18 months. So it's a nice thing to see.
Yeah, it's the practice of be mindful to give somebody feedback and to be able to reinforce for them. I love that idea. Jess, Amanda, other things that you've seen in your careers?
I'm pretty lucky. I work in an agency that is almost evenly split 50-50 between male and female. You don't see that very often, but we're pretty lucky there. One thing that I have had discussions with them, with different coworkers on, is the idea of take credit and give credit. Right. So exactly what you were saying, Carrie, there is there's that sort of slippery slope between giving people credit and giving people all the credit. And so how do you start to learn to say, thank you for your compliment, or I led this team and I couldn't have done it without the support and talents of this person, this person, and this person. Right. So once again, going back to that idea, if you're being very feminine, of giving away all of the credit, right? Is it support? Is it, there's so much to tread through. There's so many different missteps that can be made. But overall, if you are making sure you're a woman too, right? And so you have to advance your own career, and you have to take credit for the things that you are doing well, and you also can share that credit, and you can build up your team, whether they are male, female, young, old, able, disabled, whatever, right? And a lot of it boils down to being a good human, not being a great female employee or being a great male employee, but it's being a good human. And so standing up for others when they aren't there, not giving in to workplace gossip in order to feel connected to somebody else. Making sure that you are letting people know that you notice when they make comments or take actions that don't align with your values.
Jess, anything that you want to add on that front in terms of things you've seen in your career where women were particularly supportive?
Like Amanda, I'm pretty lucky to work in an organization that actually supports women in a big way. We have a lot of women in leadership in our company, including our CEO and our CMO. They're women, and we have a lot of women VPs, and we have our women business resource group, which is very active and is always, reaching out with education, leadership opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and that is something that means a lot to me. I do feel it. I feel that I have been offered the opportunity to grow without being it because I'm a woman or not, because it's a fair opportunity. It is there, and I am seen with, by the value of my work. And I feel that that is what I would want for everyone that I know, to feel like that in that environment, to work in an environment like that.
Yeah. So I think it's important for us also to discuss, we've talked a little bit about, how maybe we can be advocates, or maybe you guys can share a little bit more about how we can be advocates, or you find ways to be advocates for other women, but also not, just, and when I think about women, I think very broadly, not, of women of color, and women, we really all different types of women, and how we can help kind of lift each other up. I'm a big believer that notion that a rising tide floats all boats. And if we can help all women, all different kinds of women from different backgrounds to be more successful, then that kind of, it's the same thing that you guys mentioned early on about the seat at the table, right? That if you see more, if you see more women at the table that are doing it and that are successful, then you're not fighting over, as a woman, you're not fighting over what you perceive to be just one or two spots. There are just more seats, right? That's the idea of like, let's just make a bigger table as opposed to, just having people look and see one example of a woman. So what do you think we can do as women to support each other, and also importantly, thinking about all kinds of women of color, all kinds of women, what can we do to be more supportive?
I think like Amanda mentioned, um, be supportive of each other by listening, by taking the high road and have each other's backs, right? Like don't get into that gossip to feel connected. Don't talk about other women, elevate women. If you hear something, if a male or female or anyone is saying something about a female coworker or a female friend, and say something positive instead. I mean, I think that just changing the narrative, if we actually elevate each other, there will be no concept of people say, because even people say women don't support women. Women are talking about other women. So let's change that. Let's make sure that whenever we speak about our coworkers and our friends and acquaintances and everybody, we're actually elevating them. We're actually showing and describing them in a positive light. And everybody has something great, a great story to tell. Let's elevate those stories. So I think that that is something that is very important, to feel that you're in a where your female coworkers are going to actually speak on your behalf. So feeling that way, knowing that, I think is a and also, if you are actually, I am from Peru, and something that I felt supported and I continue feeling supported is that my female coworkers, and male and female, they actually want to reach out and understand what I need, what I want, who I am. And I think that just trying to understand, maybe even break cultural stereotypes and fight them and speak up when that happens, another way to support each other. So I think that those two, I mean, there's multiple things that we can do, but those two can make such a big impact and such a big difference in like that notion of women not supporting.
And on that front, Jess, just as a follow-on to that, would that be the same in terms of how white women might be able to support women of color? Is there anything in particular that, we should be thinking about as it relates to how white women can support women of color?
We are living in a very interesting year, right? 2020 has been the year where everybody has kind of like opened their eyes and see, okay, so this is my situation and this is how others are seeing, minorities, and the struggles that are happening. I think that the number one thing, it would be educate yourself, right? Educate and support, not only with, I mean, we're talking about right now, white women supporting women of color. So I said, like, I'm going to stay on that one topic and say, if you have coworkers and friends that are women of color, understand them, understand their culture, try to learn, even like ask, do you have any different struggles? Because we don't only have to go through, again, the gender biases, right, in the workplace, but also the race biases and stereotypes that, again, sometimes they're not out of malice, it's just out of like misinformation. So it's just try to educate yourself, connect people, bring diversity and inclusion to, like your table, to your network. And I think that that would be a good way to support women of color.
I love that, Jess. The general idea of intersectionality now is becoming more and more widely acknowledged. So the fact that you aren't just a woman, you are also a Peruvian woman, you are also a mother who is Peruvian, who is a woman, right? So what are all these intersections that go into how you frame the world and how you look at opportunities? So I mentioned, toward the beginning of our discussion, the idea of the scarcity versus abundance mindset. So if I'm going in there, I am white female in my 40s, right? All I think about are, females and women who are over 40. How many of those are there? Because that's sort of where my opportunity lies. But then imagine I were a trans woman, then I'm one more step removed. Imagine that I were a woman of color, I'm one more step removed. And the distance that starts to grow between where you perceive your barriers and where you perceive your opportunities are. And I think women who are in positions of privilege, no matter what kind, need to start by understanding that they are in a position of privilege in one shape or form. And you mentioned diversity and inclusion. And when you think about the idea, the standard comparison is diversity is being invited to the dance and inclusion is being asked to dance. There's also the idea of equity, which is when the person who was already invited to the dance looks at you as an outsider and doesn't ask you to dance, they ask you to leave and go to another party where neither one of you are excluded, right? And the fact is that when we think about diversity, when we think about inclusion, it is not about making room for, say, people of color to fit into a traditionally white environment. It is about changing your environment. Mm-hmm. So changing the environment to ensure that everyone has that equitable seat at the table.
Yeah. I love that. I love that idea, Amanda, about the difference between diversity and inclusion. I hope that it's okay if I use that, because I think it's such a great, it's a great analogy, and something that that we all also have to recognize that, one of the things too that I have found is that the more diversity you can bring to anything that you're doing, the better the outcome, because you're not universally all thinking about it the same way. And when you bring in a diverse set of people to work on something, to work on a problem, and we're talking right now about the corporate environment, you are going to get a more well-rounded solution. I mean, it just, to me, seems like a very business positive thing to do. But obviously it's going to take time. And to the point Jess was making before, we're living in a very, I think, good time in the sense that it's now very much at the forefront of the conversation, which I think it has not been for a long time. And that is one of the things that has come up over the last several months, that it is a topic of conversation. It's a topic of many conversations. So Carrie, I know you were about to say something. I didn't want to cut you off. Did you?
No, it's fine. I think just to answer your question initially, I do think that it's the small points or small moments of recognition. It's so easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but it goes such a long way. That's something I would just always keep in the back of my mind is, can I call this person out and thank them in front of a group? Or can I acknowledge what they did in an email with a lot of higher ups on an email? I appreciate it when other people do it for me. So I always keep that just in the back of my mind. Is there something I can do for someone else?
Yeah. We have a question. I know, wow, I mean, I didn't realize what the time was, and we have some questions here, so I do want to get to a couple of them. And if you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. There's a question here. If we could have the panelists address, how would you address non-supportive behavior with a female coworker, especially when she has a position of authority or power? Anyone want to take that question?
It's always tricky when the person whose behavior you want to address is in a position of power. there are multiple ways to handle it. It all depends on what relationship you have with that person, if you have a relationship with that person or not. You know, of course, my preferred way, I think Jessica has seen this once or twice in my personality. My preferred way is just to, have coffee and be like, help me understand what's going on. It's coming across as you being unsupportive of other women. And I don't know that that's your intent. But I wanted to talk to you about it and see, is there anything you want to talk about with it? Um, it's if you have that relationship, that's great. If you do not, one of the first things you do is just go talk to someone within your HR department, someone that's safe, who can keep a confidential conversation and be able to talk to them about here's how it's impacting me, right? Because that's what they need to understand, is this is how it's impacting me. It's not you going in and saying, by the way, Carrie is mean and she's not very supportive and I don't like it, right? You have to go in there and talk about how is this actually impacting you, if you don't have that relationship with the person to address it.
I was going to also offer up, this was something, it's a topic that actually came up within our Winergy group. If you know of a peer of that person that you feel comfortable going to talk to and approaching it, like you said, Amanda, can you help me understand maybe why she addresses things like this, or isn't open to other thoughts or contributions? If you do have somebody else you can go to that's her peer, maybe they can help you understand, oh my gosh, no, I totally don't think she was meaning to come across like that. I'll talk to her. If you can find someone, I think in that in her network that you might feel comfortable addressing, that might help.
All right. Yeah. Jess, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I really do believe that it really comes down to what type of relationship you have with that person. If you feel comfortable providing direct feedback to them, or if you think that there's another way to approach it. Now, what I have done, regardless of the level of, comfort, it's first trying to understand, like if it's actually feedback, or if it's performance evaluation, or if it's just the way they're communicating with me that I feel is unsupportive, I ask, so this is what you said. Can you help me understand, like Amanda said, like what are we trying to accomplish, and what is the desired behavior that you would like? And let me understand, why do you think it should be? I want to understand first where the person's coming from. And honestly, sometimes when they are communicating that back to you, they realize on their own that they were being unsupportive. Because sometimes it could have been just something that it was an unconscious bias, or, like just something that they were not thinking about at the moment, or they didn't realize that it was going to come across that way. And just discussing it sometimes helps. Now, it not always, it's not always successful. And then is when you go at different level, either a peer, HR person, but it's important that you communicate it, so we don't need to perpetuate the behavior, right? Not with anyone. So it's important to be addressed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think one of the other things that I kind of have learned is don't assume negative intent. And I think that's part of it too, is, we are all, most of the women I know in the work environment, we very much want to be helpful, and we want to succeed, and we're earnest. And so when something happens that makes us feel like, well, wait a second, is something negative coming at me, or we perceive it that way, if we take a step back for a minute and think, all right, well, let me not assume negative intent. Let me, as Carrie said, let me go ask. And as Amanda said, just go talk to them and ask them. Sometimes that is the best way to address something like that. I did want to read one comment, and then we have one more I know we're not going to get to all the questions, but I want to read one comment because I thought it was one that you guys might want to hear. Somebody wrote in, when I graduated from college in 1978 and went to work for P&G, there were so few women at that point, at least in sales, that when I met other women, I coveted relationships with them and would have done anything to protect them. We all felt that way and were close. How did that thinking lose its way? And I do think that that's a fair point. I mean, it's interesting as it's what we saw in the graph in the data that I shared earlier. The younger the women are, the more likely they are to feel, maybe not feel that camaraderie that women felt kind of early on. So I did want to share that. And I want to get to the last question. So we have, because I do think it's important that we can cover right now, which is somebody wanted to know how you felt like they could get connected. How would you go about getting connected to a mentor, or how did you start mentoring other women? Anyone want to take a stab at that? How to get connected to a mentor, or how you yourself maybe started? Maybe the other way to look at it is how you started mentoring other women.
I mean, for me personally, I always took some time to figure out who I was able to best relate to, and then I just went and asked them, "Would you consider this? It's not much time. Could we meet once a month for 30 minutes and just chat?" And then subsequently on the other side, I think as new people start to come into the organization, from college or grad school, you start to see like they're still of, the age where they're looking to be molded. They're looking for help and guidance on how to navigate a big organization. So I think it's just offering to them, hey, if you need help navigating, if you, want to, just have coffee and chat, like be more than happy to sit down with you. And I've found that people have taken me up on those offers. And so, it's not official. It's not, a file or anything like that. But I also think that's a little better because it's a lot more relaxed and it's just very honest and transparent.
So just ask, right, Carrie?
For sure. And I've also found that when I've asked and told them exactly what I wanted to learn from them, I'm like, you are amazing at sales. It is not my strong suit. I never want to be a salesperson, but I need to get a little bit more savvy with it. And starting a relationship that way, it can often make that person feel a little bit more comfortable because they're like, okay, I know how to do that. Whereas sometimes people don't, they're like, a mentor, what am I supposed to do? Do I have to take care of your children if they die? Like, they don't exactly know what it is. And so helping sort of establish that groundwork can help. And you can also go to more formalized groups like the Network of Executive Women, right? They're all over the nation. You can sign up. A lot of times your company will maybe chip in to get you membership, and be able to go and talk to a lot of different women in a lot of different industries and in different stages of life, and be able to find mentors that maybe you wouldn't have bumped into.
And if any final thought, Jess? I know we're just at the top of the hour.
I would say ask, absolutely, but also remember, like, professional mentorship and also professional growth, like personal growth, not necessarily is the same. So I've had like different mentors, and some of them were not something that I wanted to learn either from that industry themselves, but I admire them as professional women and how they grew in the workforce, and actually what they did, how they handle situations, what kind of speakers they are. And so that was a different type of growth for me in mentorship, but then definitely the professional one as well. So yeah, just ask someone that you admire. And yeah, I think that in very best.
Yeah, and I think too, what what Amanda said about go to them maybe with a very specific thing that you like about what they do. and how they, you know, what their skill set is, and ask in that area, because then it's much more tangible for them to figure out how they can help you. Well, thank you guys. I could keep talking with you because you guys have been so open and honest and insightful. So I thank you so much for your time. You know, we will continue on with learning all of these things, and thank you for spending your time with us today. Everyone who listened in, we appreciate it, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.